1942, we're here now and it freed us.
Now the Canadians continued to fight their way along the left flank of the Allied advance, following the curve of France's Channel coast. Movement was slowed down, not just by enemy resistance, but by the coastal terrain itself.
When the Canadian 3rd Division had been given the job, of taking the Channel ports, so that the Allies would have a supply base. It involved driving largely through over muddy dikes, across muddy fields. It was just unbelievable during rainy weather, and it was really intersection to intersection, barn to barn. We would have little skirmishes, and we would always win them because we had superior artillery, and they were in a retreating role, and their morale was broken, and we had no difficulty actually winning. But the mud and the mess was exasperating, and it was exhausting kind of fighting.
There was another problem in capturing the Channel ports. The Germans destroyed wharves, bridges, and rail yards before every retreat. The harbors of Dieppe, Calais, Boulogne, all were useless by the time they were taken. One port in Belgium escaped this devastation, Antwerp. But the Germans still held the Scheldt estuary that lay between the inland port and the open sea. The estuary was secured and Antwerp opened for Allied use on November 28th. But by then, a new Nazi weapon was flying through the skies. Almost 1,800 were aimed at Antwerp, the V-2 rocket.
We had been seeing the V-1s in England, and we knew that when the motors cut out, that there was a certain amount of time, and then the thing exploded.
The V-1s weren't rockets, but robot-controlled aircraft, whose engines could be heard until the fateful moment when they cut out. Aimed at England from bases across the Channel, the sound alone of the buzz bombs coming was enough to terrorize civilians.
But with the V-2s, there wasn't a sound. They came about every 20 minutes into Antwerp. And of course, what they were trying to do was to deny the Allies the use of that marvelous port at Antwerp. But they were horrifying. There's no two ways about that. We were packed, ready to move up to Holland, and a cinema in the heart of the city was hit. And although we were packed, we opened very quickly and received casualties from that. And of course, they were dreadful. They were covered in, they looked like plaster people because the blast, of course, blew the plaster off the walls. They were all, as well as their injuries, had this terrible white all over them. And I can remember a British lad giving him a cup of tea, and I said, well, how was it? And he said, wasn't so bad, sister, you know. They gave us down a cup of tea, and it was pretty good. And in a few hours, that boy was dead.
The war conditions were more difficult in Holland than they were in Normandy. The intensity of fire was not the same, of course. We were facing now a new class of German soldier. We were not facing the fanatics of the SS divisions. We had the old Wehrmacht and the old 15th German division, which was called the white bread division. They were all people with ulcers. But they were all men 40, 42, 45 years of age, mature soldiers. And they fought before surrendering, every inch of the ground.
Many of the enemy were veterans who had survived all the winter horrors of the Russian front. They just kept on fighting. So did the Canadians, short of reinforcements, stuck here in a morass of water and mud.
This was on a land that is a part of Holland, north of Belgium, Canal Leopold, and there it's all polders and dikes. And the Germans opened the dikes and it was flooded.
The flood waters released by the Germans were as hard on the Dutch civilians as on their would-be liberators.
And at night you had to dig. And as you digged, the water was coming up. Because the soil was so spongy from water that you were right in the water. And this lasted for nearly a month. And it was really very miserable and cold.
The Canadians became known as the water rats because we were adaptable. We were on the left flank all the way, so we had rivers to cross, ports to take, and we had the buffaloes and all kinds of aquatic craft to maneuver troops in. And we became very adept at it, crossing canals, crossing everything. So they had the desert rats, and we were the water rats.
Canadians waged amphibious warfare all the way from the Normandy shores of D-Day to the flooded fields of Holland. This campaign would build a lasting bond between the Netherlands and Canada. Ottawa was the wartime home of the Dutch Crown Princess, and a room in one of its hospitals was declared Dutch territory when a third daughter was born to Princess Juliana and Prince Bernhard. Canada's universities were now becoming centers of recruitment to meet a desperate need for reinforcements. By September of 1944, Canadian infantry battalions fighting in Europe were nearly at half strength. As it turned out, the slow advance in the Netherlands provided enough time for that shortage to be substantially reduced by the end of the year. Many of these new recruits put their education on hold and headed for the battlefield.
The thing I'll never forget is when the reinforcements started coming in. And by this time, they're getting younger and less trained. And yet, they did the job. You forgot your own life in order to help your buddy who was in the trench with you.
We had been through various exercises where we'd been firing live ammunition and stuff like that, but it was not quite the same. The sounds were different. There were a lot of unfamiliar sounds from shells, mortars, and that sort of thing coming towards you, coming in. You had to have ears to detect anything coming that maybe, do you in. So you became quite keyed up that way.
If you last 3 days, you're going to last 3 months. You know why? Your ear gets so well tuned up. When you hear a machine gun, you say, that's German, that's a Bren. When you hear a gun, that comes from there, and that's a German gun, that's an 88, it's not a 75. And that's a Moaning Mini. And then you read the battle more or less like you read music. The drums, the cellos, the violins, the clarinets. And you get really accustomed to war.
Well, I was with the Queen's Own Cameron Highlanders, and while I was walking along the fence, I noticed a dead soldier over there, and I didn't want to look, and I didn't. And this time I'm 23 years old, you see, so not quite. And I said to myself, my goodness, what's the matter with me? I'm going to the front line, and here I can't even look at the dead soldier. So I looked over there. It was a German soldier, a big guy, and he was dead.